Look, in theory, Katy Perry should be having a triumphant return, like all these mid-2000s pop stars are having a comeback. But instead, her new song is universally panned by critics. Today on the podcast, the group chat is here. We'll talk about what went wrong for Katy Perry. I'm Elamin Abdul-Mahmoud. This is Commotion. Look, I'll tell you this. This is not the conversation that Katy Perry wishes that we'd be having right now. Last week, she released the first single from her new and upcoming album, and the reaction has been pretty much unanimous. It's not good. What are we doing here? What are we doing here? This is Woman's World. It is supposed to be a kind of feminist anthem, I suppose. It's also written, co-written, and produced by Dr. Luke. Dr. Luke is a big-name producer. He's produced hits for everyone from Kelly Clarkson to Britney Spears to Katy Perry herself. But here's the other thing. Dr. Luke is also known as the producer that Kesha accused of rape and other forms of abuse. I should point out that Dr. Luke sued Kesha for defamation. It does make you wonder, the involvement of Katy Perry in this theme on Dr. Luke. Does Katy Perry not have anyone in her corner who's like, Katy, hey, I love you, but maybe not this? Abby Jones is with us for the very first time. She wrote about this moment in Katy Perry for Stereogum. Reanna Cruz is a music journalist and a massive Katy Perry fan. She's back with us today from LA. Rihanna, Abby, welcome to the show, y'all. How's it going?
Happy to be
good. Thanks for having me.
Hey, I'm excited to get into this because the internet is alive. We have many thoughts on this. Rihanna, I'm going to start with you because you're the one who's like, I'm out here. I'm a Katy cat. I own it. I am a fan of Katy Perry. What was your reaction when you're like, ooh, new Katy Perry's arrived in my inbox. Let's go. Let's hit it.
Yeah, I was very excited. I've been waiting for this comeback for years. Like I said, I'm a self-professed Katy cat, you know, like I'm a Witness defender. And I think I've said that before on CBC. Like I love Witness.
Witness, which has swish swish, you know, which has chained to the rhythm. But songs that like even people who are like, I like Katy Perry would be like, not this stuff though. But you're in for it. Yes.
Those are some of my favorites. But I heard Women's World for the first time on Twitter as a demo leak.
Yeah.
And I listened to it after the snippets had come out and I was like, okay, you know, like this isn't that bad. There's like a sick guitar solo, like awesome. That's so major. And then the actual song came out and I was like, oh, wow, it really is stripped of anything interesting. And I keep thinking of a tweet that I saw that was like, Women's World sounds like a song that you sing to your cat. And I wish I remember who made the tweet because it really is apt. Like it's so inane.
Yeah, I think inane is the correct word. I mean, you would literally hear it from the first sentence of the song, the first delivery. Musically, there's not a lot that's interesting that's going on in this song. That's at least how I feel. Abby, let's get into how the song came about in a moment. But first, just as a piece of music, tell me why this song doesn't work.
I wrote in Stereogum that the lyrics sound like ChatGPT wrote them, and y'all just heard the opening lines. It's all very surface level cliches talking about how women are so pretty and we can do anything just based on our gender alone. It's nothing new or thought-provoking, and in fact, I think Katy Perry has done better, quote unquote, female empowerment anthems with songs like Roar and Firework. And my friend Kat Zhang wrote in The Cut that Woman's World feels very reminiscent of the type of kind of hollow feminism that we saw during Hillary Clinton's 2016 campaign. And I totally agree. It operates under this idea that just because of our gender alone, every single woman is inherently this angelic, perfect person who can do anything. And that whole shtick feels really, really outdated right now.
So then we all get not just a song, but also the video. And maybe the video makes everything a little bit worse because the video comes out and is panned by pretty much everyone. And after that reaction, Katy Perry has to come out and say, hey, the video is actually supposed to be a satire. Listen to this.
And we're kind of just having fun, being a bit sarcastic with it. It's very slapstick and very on the nose. And with this set, it's like, ooh, we're not about the male gaze, but we really are about the male gaze.
Reanna, I don't know what I just heard, nor do I know what's in that video. Do you want to describe the video real quick, actually, if you don't mind?
Oh man, if I could. So the video is kind of separated into two halves, and Katy Perry in this clip is talking about the first half of the video in which she's dressed like sexy Rosie the Riveter on a construction site, and she's drinking whiskey for women and holding up wooden sign platitudes about being a woman. And I gather from both the juxtaposition of that with the second half of the video, which is, her as a modern day woman and being sexy and like walking through windows. I don't know. And there's the first half of the video is supposed to be satire of like the traditional form of feminism.
Yeah.
But, if you say it's satire, but nobody else thinks it's satire, is it actually satire?
I mean, this is the thing that I'm struggling with. First of all, you just mounted a better defense for Katy Perry than Katy Perry's mounted for herself. That is worth pointing out. But I think more importantly, though, like, what do you make of the argument that she's saying that when she sort of says it's supposed to be satirizing the male gaze, but also it's not really satirizing the male gaze? She's acknowledging this. It does sound a bit like an intellectual mess, if you will.
Yeah, I think it's not particularly smart of her. It feels very much that she put out snippets, she put out the video, received a little bit of backlash. Katy Perry historically has, made some interesting decisions with regards to her career. And I think the backlash to Witness kind of rewired her brain a little bit. And now she's extremely scared of making a misstep in her career. So I think the satire is like, oh, let me get ahead of it. People are saying my video is bad. Oh, but actually it's satire. And, it feels like she had that in her back pocket in case the discourse tide turned against her.
Yeah, the series of albums that Katy Perry has had in her sort of imperial era, let's say, were moments where she really couldn't miss. And like Prism sort of becomes like the very height of that, which is like, 2012, 2013. When she returns with Witness, it is an album that the lead single is Swish Swish, which is a song that Rihanna defends, but it's a song that I have a hard time backing, I'm not going to lie to you. But this is neither here nor there. The point is that, like, she has work to do, Abby. She has work to do in terms of, like, changing the public perception of her, because Witness doesn't really hit. The album after that doesn't really hit. In fact, I can't even name that album. What do you think she was trying to pull off here with this sort of comeback, Abby?
So her 2020 album was called Smile.
Thank you for reminding me.
Yes, I also had to remind myself. I couldn't even remember like what the singles were off that album.
Yeah.
It was clown themed.
Yeah, which is terrifying. Yeah, but like y'all have said, Witness was received really poorly. Smile obviously went completely under the radar in terms of mainstream pop. I mean, yeah, especially considering Katy Perry has broken records in terms of like chart performance and singles and everything. I think she is having maybe a bit of an identity crisis and is kind of scrambling to figure out who is her audience anymore. When I think of a lot of the other big pop stars today, I think of Charlie XCX, I think of Chappell Roan and Sabrina Carpenter, and all of those, I see them as artists who know their audiences. They know what kind of music they want to be making, and it feels very authentic and resonant. And I think Katy Perry has lost that at this point. So I think she was hoping that something as like bland and just whatever sort of intellectual mess Woman's World is, I think she was hoping that that would appeal to a really broad audience, and that obviously backfired.
I just want to take a moment to remind people what we were talking about here. My name is Elamin Abdul Mahmoud. This show is called Commotion, and today we are talking about this song.
It's a woman's world, and you're lucky to be living in it.
That is Woman's World. Katy Perry with me today, Reanna Cruz and Abby Jones. Reanna, we got to talk about Dr. Luke for a minute. He has songwriting credits on Woman's World. For anyone who's not familiar with his story, why are there so many red flags, do you think, when it comes to working with him, especially on a track like this, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, the case with Kesha really casts a pall, I think, over all of Dr. Luke's work, both pre and post allegations.
Hmm.
And having him work on a song that is markedly a female empowerment anthem kind of feels like a slap in the face in a lot of ways, where, even if whatever the case, I think the case was settled, so whatever that may be,
Yeah.
Dr. Luke also like is not a particularly good person. Like he's good, verbally abusive, has called women derogatory names, both Kesha and other artists. And, having that type of person on a song really just sullies what you're trying to do and renders, I think, the meaning of Woman's World moot, because everyone that she's working with on the song are male producers.
Hmm.
If you really wanted to like actively make a statement like, yeah, this is a women's world, like work with a female director, work with female producers, like produce the song yourself. Even women are capable of doing anything. Like actively make an effort. Having Dr. Luke on the song kind of just like cast this weird feeling over everything. And even now the fans don't want to get behind it because Katy Perry is still working with Dr. Luke.
Yeah, I should say Dr. Luke has maintained his innocence throughout all of this the years. He's claimed that he never assaulted Kesha, and that case was settled at a court last summer. Abby, obviously, the Dr. Luke storyline has not gone away. The idea that Katy Perry would return with a song produced by Dr. Luke, that took a lot of people, as Reanna just mentioned, by surprise. What's your take on this? What was Katy Perry thinking here?
Such a good question.
Yeah. Okay,
Yeah,
fair enough.
like having an identity crisis, trying to think of how to come back in a big way, plot all the stops. She's worked with Dr. Luke before in the past, before everything with Kesha came out.
Yeah.
So I guess she does have that rapport with him and knows that they can make a hit together successfully. But
Hmm.
yeah, that was just not the case here. And I think his involvement with Woman's World and on her upcoming album in general has just kind of soured the entire album rollout.
Yeah, I'm surprised, Rihanna, when I think about Katy Perry, because like when I think about other stars who are contemporaries of Katy Perry, when I think about like Lady Gaga, who arrived around the same time, Taylor Swift, who also only like really preceded her by a couple of years. When I think about even Lorde, who like came a little bit after her, like Charlie XCX, all artists who are able to sort of evolve and maintain their audiences or even grow them or find new audiences in this particular moment. When you look at Katy Perry and like it's just the span of her whole career, what's riding on this album that is upcoming for her, do you think?
I think everything. I think this is a really big album for her, and it's markedly her comeback, and big quotes around that. I think, she got really, really huge in an era of pop that we don't really see anymore.
Yeah.
And I think she doesn't really know what to do with herself because of that. And because of that, the past few years have been kind of random for her. She's just left judging on American Idol, which I think is like one of the lowest points you can go as a celebrity to maintain your career,
Yeah.
So she left that for this album, and she mounted a whole rollout that might not sustain herself. And I feel like Katy Perry is trying to posit herself as like a still relevant radio queen,
Yeah.
but I don't know, like I see her more on par with like somebody like Pink, who like Pink is like doing massive stadium tours
Yeah.
without hits in the real mainstream pop continual cycle. She's like putting out like music that plays on adult contemporary stations, which is totally fine, but Katy Perry is really trying to access the like young cool hip hop market, which is why
Yeah.
this is like really major, because it's her returning to her chart throne or something like that. But it's not gonna go well if Women's World is any indication.
And I think maybe that is actually one of the reasons why the response to this record and this particular song has been so mixed, is that, it is a competitive song. It is meant to play in the pop arena. Unlike, as you mentioned, and Pink is a very good example of someone who's like very happy in the adult contemporary space, not trying to be competitive with current sort of pop stars, and has a sold out arena tour every single year. Like this, Pink has no problem filling up the space. I hope that Katy Perry takes a page from Pink's, book, but I don't think that's going to happen. We'll see what happens when the album comes out. But you got to leave it there. But in the meantime, Reanna and Abby, I appreciate your time and I appreciate your energy. Thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate it.
Happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, y'all. Talk soon. Abby Jones is a writer with Stereogum. She was in New York. And Reanna Cruz is a music journalist in LA. They were speaking about Katy Perry's new single, Woman's World. By the way, Katy Perry's new album, 143, is out on September 20th. I'm Elamin Abdul-Mahmoud. This is Commotion. I should tell you that the New York Times has published a list of the 100 best books of the 21st century. And maybe you hear that and you're thinking, you mean since the year 2000? So the best books of the last, 23 and a half years? Yeah, you're absolutely correct about that. Why not? Let's do it. The Times surveyed, quote, literary luminaries to make the list, drawing from writers like Marlon James and Stephen King and celebrities like Sarah Jessica Parker and Jenna Bush Hager. The list is a mix of fiction and nonfiction, books in translation. Unlike any list on the internet, people have thoughts. So Jen Sookfong Lee, who also has thoughts, is here with hers. Jen, thanks for being here, friend.
Well, it's exciting. Well, I love talking about books.
I love talking about books and I love talking about lists. Like when a list shows up, I'm like, we're having a great time. Do you want to talk about these kinds of book lists? Because I feel like as an author, for writers, they're kind of a double-edged sword. How do you feel about lists?
I love them if one of my books is included. If one of my books is not, I hate them. And I'm saying that with every author probably thinks the same thing, whether they admit it or not.
Yes.
I do think though, like at the end of the day, I whether my books are on them or not, I do think that they reinforce this sort of like fake meritocracy that people, seem to think that the book world is built on. I mean, there are so many different genres, so many different subgenres, especially now. I think there's more and more, things coming that are new and exciting. And every reader, wants to learn something different or feel something different from a book. And so, it bothers me when there is this thing like this is the best. Like literary quality is real. There are some very bad books and there are some very good books. But I think that these lists sort of promote this like false idea of like highbrow literary versus everything else. I mean, if romantasy books are a big deal and people love those novels, let them be fancy too. They can be fancy.
Well, they're not fancy in this list, I'll tell you that. But can I just ask you, well, then what's the purpose? What's the purpose of having a list like this, do you think?
I think for the New York Times, I think they're in publishing, we talk a lot about the sort of shrinkage of books coverage, particularly in mainstream media. There's been fewer critical reviews, fewer interviews with authors, and typically they just cover like the 5 big books of the year or whatever. And so I think this is an opportunity for the New York Times to say, see, we're doing books coverage, except what they're not doing is like covering the new book from the emerging author. They're not covering a book that may have been overlooked, and which is exactly the kind of books coverage someone who works in publishing would rather see.
Right.
And I think this list is clickbaity. Obviously, people are going to click on it because they want to know which are the 100 best books. And they have this little thing on the website where you can toggle like books you've already read.
Yeah.
So it makes people feel smart. There's like if they've read more than 3, maybe. I don't know.
I mean, I will confess to you that there were books in the top 10 that I had not heard of. So that's the thing. That's the thing you got to say. Okay, well, let's talk a little bit about this specific list. So the number 1 book is My Brilliant Friend, Elena Ferrante, translated from Italian by Anne Goldstein. This is, it's an incredibly famous book. It's an incredibly beloved book. It's the first in a series about a friendship between 2 women. They meet as girls and then they grow up together. What does it say to you about this moment that My Brilliant Friend is the book that gets, voted as number 1 by the collection of people that they assembled?
It surprised me, to be honest, that it's number one. It doesn't surprise me it's on the list. It surprises me that it's number one. But I do think that this particular list has a lot of very, as I said before, highbrow literary books, a lot of them written by men. And, I feel like putting My Brilliant Friend at number one is a bit of a crumb thrown to those people who like to read what we call commercial women's fiction. It's just a little crumb because it's not actually commercial women's fiction, but it's literary fiction. But it's a little bit of a, here it is. If you like Carly Fortune, then you can feel okay about Elena Ferrante being in the number one spot.
Yeah.
However, I think that's again a false kind of like crumb because it's still up in the highbrow literary category. And I will say though, it speaks to that women by and large are still the major book buying audience.
Right.
Women buy the vast majority of books. So I mean, it's a bit of a nod to that too, I think.
Okay, I want to talk about the people that they compiled and put in a room together. I mean, they didn't put them in a room together, but the list of people.
I wish
they did. But so they got 506 accomplished writers and celebrities and people, which is kind of like get in a digital space, I suppose, and try to go through ranking all these books. This list includes James Patterson and Min-Jin Lee and Roxane Gay, but also some celebrities in there. Sarah Jessica Parker. Does that give you more or less confidence about the validity of this list?
I think it's good to have people like Jenna Bush Hager, whose book club is a very big deal, in all over the world. And I think that having readers who read popular books is a good thing, who read commercial books is a good thing. I think that I'm never going to argue against Roxane Gay in any situation. So that's always good. But Sarah Jessica Parker, though, in fairness, has her own imprint with a publishing house,
and she has
acquires
taste, man.
books.
Sarah Jessica Parker
her books are good.
Sarah Jessica Parker has great book taste. People don't talk about this enough. That's a real thing. Yes.
Yeah, shout out to Coleman Hill by Kim Coleman Foote, a wonderful novel published by Sarah Jessica Parker. But I love seeing her name there. James Patterson, though, I mean, listen,
Go on.
He hasn't written his own books in I don't know how long. And also I actually watched his masterclass on writing fiction.
Sure.
Because I paid cash money for this thing. Yeah. And I watched it and I spent the entire time yelling at my television. It's fine. It's fine. I have about neutral confidence in this group of people. How about that?
That's not bad. I think neutral confidence is actually that's a win. That sounds like a win to me. I want to talk about how a bunch of writers got multiple nods. Elena Ferrante, Desmond Ward, George Saunders each had 3 titles. No Margaret Atwood, no Salman Rushdie. What wasn't represented here that you'd like to be, you'd like to make the case for being like, maybe we could represent this?
I mean, there weren't a lot of younger contemporary authors. There wasn't a lot of spec or genre fiction. There was nods to spec, but not really a full spec novel. Very little graphic fiction or graphic memoir, some, but 2, but that's it. And very little poetry. There's books that are poetry adjacent, but are not really sort of actual books of poetry. If I had to include some myself, if this was Jen Sookfong Lee's list of the 100 best books of the 21st century, I would love to see Ducks by Kate Beaton, which is a book I love very much.
Yes.
I would love to see
Canadian book.
Canadian book. I'm gonna choose all Canadians, honestly.
Let's go.
The Sleeping Car Porter by Suzanne Mayer should have been on that list.
Yes.
Little Fish by Casey Plett, which is amazing and wonderful. And One American, I would say, but How Much of These Hills is Gold by C. Pam Zhang, which has spec
book.
elements.
Yeah.
Wonderful book. Yes.
Yeah.
That's what I would have chosen.
Okay, I got maybe 40 seconds here left, but this list is going to look different in 10 years, and not just because there'll be more books out by then, but I think there's something about this set of books, this list of books that reflects the current value. What does this list say to you about our current culture right now?
I'm saying with books, it's saying to me that we're still valuing that highbrow literary book, and that the conversation about high and low culture that has been occurring for years now in film and television and music has not quite infiltrated the book culture in the New York Times type of way. If you're looking at book talk, that's a totally different situation. But if you're looking at in terms of the New York Times, which is the most literary of all newspapers, it's still not caught on to that conversation. And I think that, really the New York Times is still catering to that reader who does want to feel really smart, who does want to congratulate themselves on reading, 51 of these books that are like, challenging to read. So that's how I feel about it.
I appreciate you being here. I appreciate you sharing how you feel. Jen, you're the best. Thank you so much for your time, friend.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. I'm going to go read My Brilliant Friend. That's what I'm going to do. I'm doing it. I'm on it. Jen Sookfong Lee is an editor and author of books like Superfan and Good Mom on Paper. She was speaking about the list published by the New York Times of the 100 best books of the 21st century. That is it for the show today. My name is Elamin Abdul Mahmoud. This show is called Commotion. And guess what? We'll be here tomorrow.